Okay, welcome to my art history and appreciation presentation. The first thing I want to talk about is the resources I used over the 10 or so classes I taught art history. Um, Less Stress, More Success by Anya Karthik. I found this book quite good, especially for things like diagrams. It was a little light on kind of fleshed out detail of the stories. It was kind of information in bullet points, which was good in some senses, but not so good in others. Um, Art by Aidan O'Sullivan, I found to be quite a poor publication. The colour illustrations were quite good, but it was lacking in detail, seriously lacking in detail. Um, I found a lot of good books around my own art room. This was one of the better ones, Italian Renaissance Art by David G. Wilkins. It was just good. It kind of fleshed out the stories of the time, and it just had a more detailed information. So I did a lot of photocopies and stuff from this. Like I said, had good colour illustrations. I used a lot of web resources as well, arthistory.net, arthistory at about.com. Wikipedia I found good for just concise points of information, and artcyclopedia.com. So the period I concentrated on in the first block was the Quattrocento, painting in the Quattrocento in northern Italy, mostly Florence, I suppose. The artists we looked at were Giotto. We had a brief look at Giotto more than anything else to give the painters who came later some context, looking at the style Giotto developed compared to the kind of iconic style that was predominant around his time. More so we looked at primarily Paolo Uccello and Masaccio. The key concepts I wanted to convey to the students were the idea of humanism, how the idea that was coming into society at the time, that humans were the center of all things, and how this was reflected in the arts. The idea of art patronage, how it was somewhat moving from strictly religious patronage to lay patronage. Obviously, the families like the Medicis and what effect they had on the production of art at the time, especially in Florence. The causal factors of the Renaissance itself, how classical knowledge was flowing back from the East after the fall of Constantinople, and the technical discoveries of the time. I tried to emphasize how, even though these men were artists, they were also in many ways scientists. They were, discovering things like perspective, etc. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So the tribute money formed really the basis for one whole class at the start. The picture was excellent for analysis in terms of it provides very good, clear examples of linear perspective, of perspective in terms of how the trees and Peter are taking the coin out of the fish's mouth in the background, emphasize the depth of field in the picture. Obviously the humanistic gestures of Jesus, and other ways of treating the figure that were developed around the time. Also, I think the students really enjoyed the strong narrative that flows through the picture. Another image we looked at was the Battle of San Romano by Masaccio, or by Uccello, excuse me. Again, the use of perspective in the shields, the fallen soldier, the famous fallen soldier who died for perspective, as they say. Again, the students enjoyed this because of the strong narrative being related to the battle against the Sienese, etc. So in the second block, we went on to Italian Renaissance sculpture. So the artists we looked at were Ghiberti, Donatello, and Michelangelo in the Renaissance sculptures. The next piece of art history I dealt with. So we looked at Ghiberti in the same kind of way as we had looked at Giotto, just to give a kind of context for what was to follow on. There's some of the aspects I wanted to cover about this period of the Renaissance with students were building on what we looked at in the Quattrocento, ideas like humanism and technical accomplishment. So it was good. There was quite a good synergy here, and it gave us a chance to kind of cover some ground we looked at before. No piece epitomizes this kind of human-centric approach quite like Mary Magdalene by Donatello. The raggedy clothes she's wearing, evoking pity in the viewer. Um, we looked at the same strong human-centered approach in David, is the classic S-shaped bend, a real departure from the Gothic. La Pieta by Michelangelo then provided an excellent example of some of the technical achievements that were made at the time. Not to mind, obviously, the incredibly realistic portrayal of two human beings, um, but the way Michelangelo was able to achieve the sculpture in terms of distributing Jesus' weight in solid marble across Mary's lap using the pleats of her dress. So they were the main areas of art history that I covered. Some of the main methodologies I employed, I suppose, one of the most important things I found was coming into the classroom and speaking about what we'd covered in the last class. Just briefly running over, say, if we had looked at Masaccio's the tribute money, discuss linear perspective, or discuss the narrative, or discuss the painting styles, or humanism, or something like that, just to keep it fresh, and then relate it to what we're about to move on to today. I found learning through narrative, or I suppose teaching through narrative, to be very effective, especially with this fifth year group. Stories like the Battle of Siena, in the Battle of San Romano, or the tribute money, they really kind of took to those stories well, and they seem to kind of attach concepts like perspective, just they latched onto the side of these stories. We did a lot on image analysis in terms of how they would go about breaking down an image, even if it was an image unknown to them. That there was specific steps they could go through, to make some sense of it. In terms of appraising the learning of the students, the main way I went about this was at the end of both blocks. They had to come up with a project. This involved each girl selecting an artist and a piece of work and going away and doing the research on it themselves. So they were investigating the artist themselves, and I found it a much more effective way than setting them tests. I just found it a better way of them actually really learning. So the next thing I want to talk about is how I tried over the course of the 10 weeks or so to make the girls apply what I was teaching them, to apply that knowledge to the state exam system, I suppose. So we frequently looked at marking schemes in terms of what they will get marks for, what they won't get marks for in different types of questions. The use of diagrams. I wanted to make the girls, the students, aware, just to put in the right amount of information that suffices to answer the question asked, and not to go over and above that, and to make sure and annotate it. Practice essays, again, we did about 3 or 4 practice essays over the course of the 10 weeks. I found them a useful way of kind of assessing whether the girls were taking on board the information during the classes. Here's just some examples from the diagram workshop, in terms of, you can see we're describing La Pieta by Michelangelo, and the kind of triangular structure that gives the whole thing integrity. You can see on the left there how it's been annotated in terms of the function of the dress. Here's the assessment rubric I came up with for art history contextual understanding, in terms of, were they understanding how the art at the time and the artists relate to art now and to art before them, and the relevance of that, their technical understanding, of the processes, like the sculptural processes, or the looking processes, like such as perspective, etc. Part of the assessment rubric was on their project mark, in terms of their project and presentation, and obviously participation and attitude. So that's the end of this presentation. I might have left out at the start the reason I picked the Quattrocento and the sculpture of the Hieronymus, because I feel that the things that I was familiar with myself. I must say I thought overall both schemes went quite well, and I actually really enjoyed the presentations the girls made at the end. Um, yeah, they seem to have engaged with the material to some extent, so that was encouraging. Okay, so that's it. Thanks very much, and I apologize about the sound quality. No matter what way I adjusted the settings, there was a slight amount of feedback. But anyway, thank you very much.